Welcome, everybody, to Prime the Pump podcast. I'm Brent Hudson, teaching pastor at the Journey Church, and I'm here today with Dave Morehouse, lead pastor of the Journey Church, and we are continuing our discussion about the life of Jacob. And this week we conclude, actually, this book by Paul Stevens and the life of Jacob, and we're going to look at, as one would expect at the end of something, this big topic of death. So, Dave, what do you have planned to share with the church this weekend?
Well, first of all, I really do want to celebrate that we ended this, we're ending this series. It was a 9-part series, and I kind of think sometimes, in our short attention span world, even spiritually speaking, we maybe were, stretching people a bit. But what I liked about this whole series, I'll say generally, before we talk about sort of the final chapter, pun intended. But I think that in this series, again, we were reminded that there are a lot of big, ordinary moments in our life that I think we can intersect with God in.
Absolutely. And that God really works in profound ways in ordinary things.
In those ordinary moments, right? And again, I want to do a shout out. Actually, he was one of my former professors. Dr. Paul Stevens, who wrote this book called Down to Earth Spirituality. I would certainly encourage people to look it up on Amazon, and I still believe you can get it if you wanted to sort of do that next deeper dive into that reading.
Yes.
As we do look at this life of Jacob, we do finally come to the last chapter of Jacob's life, where he experiences what billions of people experience. And I know, Brent, you took me to a website that is a clock counter about how many people die, and I think, what is it? One person dies every 1.7 seconds.
1.88 seconds, I think it was, something like that. So 115 or something like that every minute.
So again, without being morbid about it, if we do a talk here over the next 5 minutes or so, we're going to be in the neighborhood of 600, 700 people have died before we finish our Prime the Pump podcast today.
Yes.
But with all that said, I do think one of the biggest challenges in our culture today is for us to fight this push where we don't talk about death in the sense of, how does that shape our thinking? How does that change the way we even talk about spiritual questions and talk about faith questions? Because I do think that really has to be a key framework to everything we do. I'll throw it over to you about where we want to go with this, but obviously we want to move to helping people move from a place of denial to acceptance, but not in a fatalistic way. I know we're referencing in our message one other professor of mine. I'm sorry, I'm kind of name dropping a bit here, but the late Dr. J.I. Packer said, once you are ready to die, that's the first step in learning how to live.
Right.
And I think that maybe that's counterintuitive, and people don't want to hear that. But the more I ponder that in my later chapters of life now, I think, when I'm ready to die, I guess I'm ready to live. So Brent, in this story of Jacob and extension, his family, what are some of the key ideas that we want to be talking about?
Yeah, well, I think that, like what you just said, that's so important, because it's not so much that our culture or people within the culture itself deny that death happens. It's just that they don't allow it to sort of permeate our existence and shape the way we live our lives, right? So it's like, okay, yeah, I'm going to die, but that's all I want to think about that, and then let's move on to fun things, right? Or difficult things or whatever, but something else, something that's not so, end of story-ish. So, but that's a really important push in our culture, because that is a framework that, we've segregated death out of our regular lives, and professionals deal with that, and it's just not in front of us like it would have been in the ancient world. But what strikes me in this whole idea of when you quote Packer is that is the real question is, how do we live life well, knowing that our lives have an end point, and that after that end point, there is an accounting of our lives, right? I mean, the Bible is clear not only that It's appointed for a person to die, but also to stand before God and make an account for the deeds done in the body, as Paul would say. And of course, we know we have grace, and we know that Jesus Christ died for our sins. And when we have faith in Jesus, it's not a question of whether we're going to survive judgment, because it's going to be about mercy. But like Paul talks about in Corinthians, some are going to get through by the skin of their teeth, right? The wood, hay, and stubble people. And I do think that probably a lot of those wood, hay, and stubble people are people who never really gave much thought to the death and what's next, and living their life in light of that. But we have this person of Judah, and in fact, you have all the brothers, really, except for Benjamin, but you have all the brothers, and this journey of 20 years between when they sold Joseph into slavery, who they were then, as opposed to who they are now in the story. And we get a real glimpse of the change and the transformation that's taken place when we see Judah's life, and how he, maybe he was one of the instigators in selling Joseph, or being, treating him unjustly. And now in this end story, we see him, willing to put himself on the chopping block, so to speak, to save Benjamin, because his love for his father he can't bear to see his father grieve a second son lost. And so, in a sense, what you see is the kind of proper response to a person growing up and realizing that their life has meaning and also has an end point, and not wanting to create more disaster in our lives, right? But actually deal with things, and to take on an attitude of service and of love. And we see that in this person of Judah, and it's actually a very beautiful story. In fact, many commentators have said that we're not sure exactly what Joseph's intention was with all this scheming, but it may have been to actually punish his brothers. But when he saw the true heart change in Judah, something softened in his heart, and he was able to deal with his own feelings about seeing his family again after so many years. And so you really do get a sense that at the end of the story, at the end of Jacob's life, that things have come full circle with his children, with his own moral, questionable ideas and things he did. And it's a wonderful story, but we need to learn from it.
Sort of our two big key ideas that we're going to be sharing as we reflect both on Jacob and Judah, and just this whole idea of how do we move to a place of where we put death into our thinking and framework of what it means to live a life of faith and a life of hope. We're going to be talking about the importance of letting go, and we're going to be talking about the importance of finishing well. What does it mean to start letting go? Because eventually we do have to let go. And
no, exactly.
But more importantly, how do we finish well? Well so that we can look forward to the next step in the presence of God, and also finish well in the sense of even legacy, and what do we want to leave behind.
There's one thing that Stephen says in his chapter that I found quite inspiring, and that was that this life is important, but it's not the most important life, right? I mean, there's this sense in which what death does, and a belief in something that comes next, is it puts a proper perspective into everything. Yes, this is a good thing, but it's not the ultimate thing. Or this is a bad thing, but it's not the ultimate bad thing, right? I mean, so death and having that perspective of finality gives us a greater perspective on how to weigh things in our own lives.
Well, Brent, this is going to be a serious message, but I'm also hoping it will be one that will bring about a sense of focus, and without sounding too mystical about it. I wonder, by bringing that kind of focus to it, it may create a sense of both hope and lightness to our souls around a really difficult part of our lives.
Absolutely. Well, Dave, I look forward to hearing what you come up with on the weekend. And it's always hard to preach on these topics, but it's something we need to hear about. And so, Lord be with you this weekend as you bring us the word.
Hey, looking forward to it, Brent. Same to
Okay.
you as well.
Okay, take care. Bye now.